Hi everyone, this is Brian Hayes and welcome to episode 25 of the Music Mind podcast. Today my special guest is Clive Lendich, a Sydney-based professional guitarist and producer who has earned his living within the entertainment industry for more than 45 years. Clive is an amazing musician with a wonderful story to tell. Please enjoy my conversation with Clive Lendich.
Fly me to the moon and let me play among the stars. Let me see what spring is like on Jupiter and Mars. In other words, hold my hand. In other words, baby, kiss me. Fill my heart with song and let me sing forevermore. You are all I long for, all I worship and adore. In other words, please be true. In other words, I love you. Fill my heart with song and let me sing forevermore. You are all I long for, all I worship and adore. In other words, please be true. In other words, I love you. I do.
Well, hi Clive and welcome to episode 25 of the Music Mind podcast. It's fantastic to have you here today as my special guest.
Thanks, Brian. It's great to be here, and thanks for asking me on the show.
Our audience have just seen and heard a really good arrangement of the old Sinatra classic, Fly Me to the Moon, just a duo arrangement. You on jazz guitar and a wonderful vocalist, Steve Davis. I guess, first of all, can you tell us a bit about Steve?
Yeah, look, years ago, Marty Roan, you remember Marty Roan? He had a little talent sort of school happening and was telling me about this great singer that he was in his school. And I said, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, they're all great singers, sure, whatever. You know, and then and then I got to hear Steve and I went, wow, jaw dropped. I went, man, that is a silky smooth, beautiful voice. So I said to him that I want to work with you, we should do some stuff. And that's basically how it happened. And I've always been really impressed with his sound. His timbre is just beautiful, you know, and it's not like he's studied singing in great detail. I mean, he's just got a natural affinity for it, you know. Apparently his father used to play a lot of Sinatra and all that around the house, and he just grew up listening to that. And yeah, it's just osmosis.
Yeah, well, the thing that blew me away was just the moment he opened his mouth. I thought, oh, what a wonderful voice. And he also told the story a bit like Sinatra. There was no attempt at scat singing or clever singing. He just told the story which is,
Isn't that a pleasant change? I
oh,
mean, don't we
look,
love that?
don't we love that? And what I also loved is your accompaniment was just masterful. It really reminded me of George Gola. I grew up,
Oh,
the way George traveling around Australia, backing Don Burrows, two of my favourite musicians, putting that arrangement together. Obviously, you're not sitting there reading sheet music, but how did the two of you guys work on that arrangement?
yeah. So basically, we sort of pick a tune, like we've done a few different tunes, and I'll just arrange it a little different to the standard one. Some are pretty close to the standards, and others are pretty far away from it. We might change the feel completely, and just basically put it together like that. And yeah, and Steve's like, he just falls into place beautifully. He just sings naturally. And it all just works out. So we've done quite a few of those little ones together. So,
Well,
and we've done
yeah.
quite a few gigs together like that.
Okay. And of course, in that particular one that the audience have just seen, you also take a solo on lead. Obviously, you've, multi-tracked that. The other thing that, like the sound on Steve's voice, the sound on your guitar there is gorgeous. I mean,
Oh, thank you.
we're going to see and hear you play today in a whole lot of different styles using different guitars. But
Yeah,
that's a hard party trick to pull off, that beautiful chord style jazz playing and lead playing. Now, it's a
yeah.
beautiful guitar you're playing, a bit of an unusual guitar. What is that
Ah,
guitar?
that one is a little unusual. I was in the UK with Sedaka on tour, and we went to go and see Joe Pass at a hall in somewhere in the centre of London.
Yes,
So there was a support act on, and none of us were interested in the support act. We wanted to see Joe Pass,
that's
he was
right.
one of our heroes.
Yeah.
So this is with the American band, and the drummer, Jim Varley, who's a dear friend of mine, he said, "Hey guys, I'm going to go and check it out." He came back, and his face was white. He says, "Get your asses in there now." And we all went in there, and we dropped dead. There was this guy called Martin Taylor, who we
Yes.
hadn't heard of before.
Wonderful player.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he knocked us out. He was
Yeah.
amazing. He's like from another planet. But he
Yes.
used this guitar. It's a Yamaha Martin Taylor AEX
Oh,
1500. And what it basically is, it's like a jazz box, but it's
yeah.
also got a piezo in it.
Under the
So
under,
it gets
yeah,
a,
yeah.
yes, exactly. So you get a very acoustic sound if you want, or a jazz sound, or you can blend a little bit of both and get a more stringy type uh,
Wow.
jazz sound. And that's what that one is. So I'll use that for most of those type of gigs.
So in Fly Me to the Moon, were you basically using the pickup on its own? Do you remember when you recorded that?
Most,
Or?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Most of the time, like for solos, I'll just flick to the pickup by itself. But for
yeah.
the rhythm, I'll use a little bit of the piezo and the magnetic pickup together.
Oh, the sound is wonderful. Another
Oh, that's great.
one of my heroes as a kid, just even before I played any instrument, was Tony Mottola from
Oh,
America.
yeah,
He
great,
had those
great.
series of records, and the sound on Tony's guitar, your
Yeah,
actual tone reminded me when you're doing your single string stuff. I thought, wow, that's a rare tone. It's wonderful. You should really be happy the fact that you can get a sound like that in an era when most people rely on the effects on the guitar rather
yeah.
than the fingers, the tone that you get in
Yeah,
your
the
hands.
sound comes from the fingers. That's right. That's totally
Oh,
right.
you know,
I mean, it's funny you mentioned George Goller before too. Like he was one of the first real jazz guitar players I saw when I was a kid in Perth growing up. I went to the Octagon at the University of Western Australia, and he and Don were doing a concert, and that just knocked me for a six. I went, "Oh my God, another Martian."
well, it's funny. We share a similar thing. My brother's a great guitar player. He's 4 years older than me. But when we were just
Mhm.
kids, one of my school teachers said, "Oh, look, there's a couple of players." He came from Sydney, the school teacher, and we grew up in Gympie, which is a little regional.
Oh
It's
yeah,
it's a
yeah.
city now, but it was at that time it was a glorified country town. And he said, "Look, I'll drive you down." And we're just thinking, what? We're playing guitar in little country dance bands, thinking we're heroes. I could play Johnny Be Good, the solo in Johnny Be Good. And I thought, well, that's it. What else can I possibly do on guitar?
Don't need anything else. That's it. Got it
So
all covered.
that's right. I got it all covered. And he
Uh,
takes us down, and same as you, it's a workshop with Don Burrows and George Golder. And
wow.
it hit us so hard because my brother and I sat there, and I think it was about a 90-minute workshop. And we did not recognize a single chord shape that George played in that entire 90 minutes. We just looked at each other. We're used to, first position C, D, and A.
Uh,
And George is just the only time we recognised anything that George played was he did a little rip-off on guitar of his banjo intro to Skippy the Bush Kangaroo.
Oh, you know that story, right?
Yeah, that's right. So George played it on the guitar and he ended on a G, C, first, and
We know those.
We know those. So
We
it's
can
the
play
same.
those chords.
We just walked, we were never the same after seeing that. And
Oh yeah,
that's interesting. We share
yeah.
that sort of feeling.
I think George is a complete monster. He really is. He's great, such a great player, such a great Australian legend.
Absolutely, as good as anyone in the world.
Yes.
If he, absolutely as good as anyone. Now, Clive, on your website, and I really encourage people to go to your website. You break things up really good. Recordings, performances, and all of that sort of stuff. You list at least 60 top name artists that you've performed with over your career
Over many years.
Oh yeah, and I mean there's some huge names in there, and I know this is a hard question, but are there any sort of standout moments from that massive list when you look back over that career you've had? And I'm talking here not so much recording but live performances. Are there any that sort of stand out in your mind, and if so, for what reasons?
I think my period of time with Manhattan Transfer was probably the pinnacle.
Wow.
Really was. Because they're a band I used to pay money to go and see when they came to Australia, and the vocal talents were amazing,
Yes.
absolutely amazing. So I always loved them anyhow. So when I got asked to do the job, it was like a dream come true, to work with them. But it's also the fact that you're working with, it was a quartet, like 4 singers and 4 band. You're working with musicians that are far greater than you, and like in an incredible. Like I'll give you an example. This sums it up beautifully.
Yeah.
I remember at the end of one of the tours, I think we're doing Japan, and we're going, we're heading off our own ways. Everyone's flying to different parts of the world, and we're having lunch or something in the airport. And I said to Steve Hass, the drummer, "What are you doing?" He says, "Oh, I'm going off to play with John Schofield, do a tour with him." I went, "Oh, great." And then I said to the bass player Mike Pope, "What are you up to when you go back?" He says, "Oh, I'm touring Japan again, but this time with Chick Corea." And I go, "Okay, you want to know what I'm doing? I'm doing Greenacre Bowling Club in the auditorium." And that's some that sort of summed it up.
Yeah.
You're working with amazing talent.
I think there's a little magic moment there. You just said before that you were playing with players that, in your opinion, were just the next level to you. Now we're gonna watch you play with Manhattan Transfer a little bit later, and I can assure you, from my point of view, everyone's on the same level. Your playing was fantastic, but one of my things, I do a lot of teaching online and in person on a whole lot of instruments. But one thing I always say to people is get out there and play with players, and don't be scared if you're the worst player in the band.
Yeah, totally. It lifts your own playing up.
Absolutely.
You've got to really work at it to be as good as those guys. So it does. You're 100% right.
Fans of the podcast may have recently watched a great episode I did with Michael Fix, who's a guitar player that I'm sure you know.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. That was great.
And, Michael did some wonderful playing on that, and also really exposed some wonderful aspects about stage fright and how he deals with it. But what I want to do is, there's a great clip I played of Michael playing classical gas at an Australian Day.
Oh, yeah.
And you're over there. At the time, the focus was on Michael's wonderful acoustic playing. But you do equally as great electric playing. And you're playing, the first question I've got is, that's a beautiful guitar you're playing in that clip. And I notice you use that guitar a bit. It's sort of a Stratocaster, but it isn't. Do you remember that guitar?
Yeah.
Which one's that?
I'm not sure if it was this one, which is an old Schecter.
No, it was
this one.
That one.
Oh, okay.
The Sunburst.
Tom Anderson. Yeah.
Now, what a beautiful guitar. Tom Anderson.
This has been my workhorse for so long.
Wow.
I'll quickly tell you the story.
Absolutely.
I was doing the Don Lane Late Night Oz show with Jamie Rigg and the boys.
Yes.
Doug and Victor.
Yep.
And I was using that other brown one I just showed you. It's a Schecter.
Yes.
And the Schecter was made in America at that time. The head of the design people for Schecter was a guy called Tom Anderson. But Schecter got bought out by a Japanese company, went to Japan, and Tom said, "No, I'm staying in the States. I'm going to start my own company up." So he made these hot rod versions of Strats, like all the things about Strats he didn't like, he fixed it all and made it a
Wow.
beautiful guitar.
Yeah.
So Nunzio Gumbali from Pro Audio in Canberra was going to import these. He got one of the very first ones and said, "Can you use it on the show?" I said, "Can I use it on the show?" Of course, I'd love to. So he set it up, and I used it on the show, and loved it. Just loved it.
Oh,
And
yeah.
at the end of the when the show folded, they actually said, "Just keep it." That's actually this one. This is another Tom Anderson. And that's the
Wow.
one I was using. And that was the one he was using on all his brochures and things.
Beautiful.
And so they said, keep it. And I went, "Oh, thanks, awesome. I'll do
Yeah.
that." And I bought another one since. So I've got a couple of these, but they're beautiful guitars. They're just like so beautiful to play and feel so good, sound so good. Just love them. They're just
Oh,
superb instruments.
as soon as I saw this clip, I thought, wow, that's a great sounding guitar and great looking guitar. Now,
Yeah.
this is, you're playing here with the late Tommy Tico, another legend of Australian
Yeah.
music. And I
Have
think,
to work a lot with him. Yeah.
oh, I think Tommy did so much to bring the world of classical and contemporary and that together. And,
Totally agree. Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
and this clip sums it up to me. You've got all the classical musicians there. You've got a contemporary rhythm section. You've got Michael Fix playing really, and his story
Beautiful
was,
acoustic.
oh,
Yeah.
beautiful. And I loved his story about Tommy Emmanuel being double booked. And Tommy, mate, can you do this gig for me? And of course, the gig is, what's the gig? Oh, I'll play my version that I recorded of classical. So for him, I can understand the nightmare that would have been. But for
Oh,
you,
yeah.
now your parts are beautiful there. I guess you're not so much in the spotlight. Were your parts written, or how did you go about those beautiful melodic lines? And it seemed to be some free improvisation for you. Do you
Yeah,
remember?
there's a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah, Ken Lang used to be Tommy's manager, and Ken said, "Can you do this gig?" And I went, "Yeah, sure." He said, "Well, I'll send you the parts." So he had some basic stuff written out, but there's also, as you say, a little room for improvisation. So it was a little open to interpretation, but generally he had it all mapped out. But then he said, and I'm a reader. I've been reading since I was a kid,
yeah.
so I expected we are going to have music on stage. He goes, "No, no music." I went, "Oh God!" I had to go and sweat it for a couple of days and try to learn it off by heart. So
Oh, it's
yeah,
wonderful. Let's have a look. And as I say, for people who are fans of the podcast, this one we've played before, but I'm so happy to play it again because this time we're focusing on your wonderful electric guitar playing, like the sustain. Were you using any particular effects there? You've got tremendous sustain on that electric
yeah. Well,
guitar.
those guitars have got a lot of sustain. Those Tom Anderson guitars,
Yes.
uh, but also probably back in that day, it was interesting. Was when we were doing the late night Oz show,
Yeah.
I was using pedals,
Yes.
separate pedals, as we sort of all gone back to.
Yeah.
And I remember Keith Walker, the incredible sound guy, who, the engineer for that, came down one day in the break, said, "They're going to go one day. It'll all just be in one box."
Yeah.
And sure enough, about 2 months later, multi effects came out. The Korg
Yes.
A1 or A3 came out, a
Yes.
multi effects processor. And I bought one and
Okay.
used it on the show after that. But, after that, like everyone started going nuts with, condominiums of gear and all
No.
that, racks of gear and all
Yeah.
that stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then it sort of did a flip back to using pedals again, right? Which
Yes.
has sort of been for a while now, that more puristic. But also in the last few years, all the amp modelers have sound so good now that a lot of people, like myself now even, are using them for touring, because I do quite a lot of touring and
Yes.
on and off planes all the time, and you can't lug big pedal
No.
boards around.
No.
So I've been taking like a smaller multi-effects processor that fits in a backpack.
Yep.
That sounds terrific. They've come a long way.
Yes.
So it's just like it just goes around in circles. I mean, probably another 5 years we'll all go back to little pedals again.
That's exactly right. Let's have a look and a listen of classical gas. Clive playing some wonderful electric guitar, the late Tommy Tico, the Sydney Orchestra, and Michael Fix. Clive, wonderful memories there, and there's some massive images of you on some of the Sydney skyscrapers that I'm sure must have been interesting at the time when you're trying to focus on playing.
Scary.
Yeah, I want to take you right back now. I believe you originally came from Perth. Is that correct? You're a
Yeah,
Perth boy?
or as my mother would say, Fremantle, not
Oh,
Perth. We're doing a concert in Perth,
yeah,
and Mum and Dad came along,
yeah,
and the whole band, Neil Sedaka's band, was all American except
yes.
me. So they introduced the band. Neil introduced the band, and then he said, "And we have some local talent here from Perth, Western Australia, Clive Lendich." And my mum got out from the audience. He's not from Perth. He's from Fremantle.
And you're just looking for a hold.
Yeah, like, oh no.
And then, look, it's interesting. I've had some wonderful guests from Perth. Louise Anton, a
Oh
wonderful
yeah, she's another
singer.
Perth girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mentioned in Louise's thing that, it's an interesting fact for our international audience that Perth holds the record, I understand, of being the most isolated capital city in the
Yeah.
world. In the
Yes.
world.
True.
Isn't
True
that
story.
interesting?
It
And
is. It's crazy when you think of it.
so many great talents have come from there. So tell us, I mean, how did it all start? Was it always the guitar? When did you first get interested in music, I guess?
Okay, so it was in grade six at CBC Fremantle, all
Okay.
boys college, and more of a sports type college.
Yes.
And they introduced the recorder,
Right.
right? You can imagine how that went over in an
That
all
went,
boys
yeah,
college.
great. Yeah.
Like, so, but not me, of course. I loved it. And
Yeah.
pretty
Okay.
soon I was doing a Stedfords and concert in Perth on the descant and the treble, and
Yeah.
loved it. So we had a teacher called Brother Swanee,
Yeah.
and he was a folkie. Used to do the folk masses and all that,
Yes.
singing and playing.
Yes.
Had a beautiful maiden, and he said, "Look, you obviously got this talent for music. Throw away the recorder. Let's get into some guitar." So he put me onto some basic guitar stuff. My parents bought me a horrific, is the only way to describe it, guitar. It was terrible. It was all they could afford. I come from a big family. We didn't have a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
spare cash,
Yeah.
and so they bought me this guitar, had action on it like that high, and
Oh,
really hard to
yeah.
play,
Yeah.
steel string thing. But
Yeah.
anyhow, it was good, but it's like it made you work hard, which is good, I guess.
Yes.
And anyhow, Brother Swanee set me up with a teacher out in Bicton, which is a suburb of Perth, and Mum used to drive me out there for lessons. Basically, I did that for about a year, and he said, "Look, I can't teach you anymore. You need to go to this guy in Perth
Yeah.
called Angelo Christopher, who was a jazz guitar player, very much like George Goller, and a
Okay.
great player." And he got me into the jazz thing, like the Don Andrews books
Oh,
about
yes.
all the chord
Yes.
solos and things. He
Yes.
got me into all that. Used to whack my thumb and say, "Put it behind the next, put it behind it," because I was doing all that,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Still
Yeah.
do, I still do that. It
do.
didn't work.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
So yeah, so it sort of from there, it was like, wow, this is serious. I'm getting really into this now. I'm really loving it, and
Yeah.
it took over most of my spare time. Every spare moment I got, I was playing, and practicing those Don Andrews solos and things like that. And he got me into reading, and he got me into the chord solos. He got me into jazz chord voicings and all that. So he was great, setting me up for the future. Uh,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and so that happened for quite a while. I started playing in bands. I mean, the original influences were like the Shadows, of course,
Yeah.
but and Hank Marvin, who I think was amazing, and still
Absolutely.
think he's amazing.
Yeah.
But then it sort of with Angelo, he got me into the jazz thing. I started listening to more jazz players, Kenny Burrell, Johnny Smith,
Yeah.
Tal Farlow, all that
Great.
mob,
Yeah.
and loved it. I was really starting to dig it. Starting to do gigs around Perth with a brilliant piano player, young piano player from Perth who lives here now, has been working here for many years, called Michael Bartolome.
Okay.
Played with
Yes.
Terry Bedell for many years, and still a great force to be reckoned with on the
Yeah.
jazz scene.
Yep.
And that was all going really well. Uh, really happy over there with playing in a big band over there called the Will Upson Big Band. And that was a lot of fun. I'd never played in a big band before. I was reading, playing in a big band. It was awesome. I was living on top of the world.
Yeah.
And one night we were doing a concert in Pinocchio's nightclub. And in the break, this guy came up to me, a guy from Sydney called Gary Vickery. He came up to me and says, "Listen, I'm a girl singer from Sydney. Her name's Diana Lee. You remember Diana Lee?
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
I'm her musical director. She's here. Come and talk to us." What happened? He was leaving her to do something, and they were trying to basically say, "Do you want the job?" So
Wow.
basically, they offered me the job. I'd never even thought of coming to the eastern states, like
No.
as we referred to it, like
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
and I thought, well, like guys, I appreciate this, but I've never even thought. Can you give me a few weeks to think about it?
Yeah.
Cut a long story short, I did think about it. I thought I'll go over for a couple of months, check it out, and
Yeah.
come back. I knew 100% I'd go back to Perth. Well, that was like 45 years ago.
So had you left school at this stage, or
No, I
no?
think
No.
no. Actually, I tell you what, I tell a lie. I think with the Will Upson Big Band, I had left school just,
Okay. Okay.
and I was going to Perth Uni there studying electronic engineering, which was interesting, but not what I wanted to do. And we had nowhere to be educated musically back then. We didn't have a conservatorium of music.
No.
Classical was fine, but nothing jazz. And
Yeah.
I knew there was the jazz, the con over here. So I thought, I'm going to check it all out, all that. So, and that's
So,
basically what happened.
wow. What an interesting story. Now you
Mm.
talked there about your jazz playing and that wonderful background going through the Don Andrews books. How did the contemporary stuff come about? Because you're a wonderful contemporary player.
Oh, that's
How did that come
interesting. Yeah.
about? Yeah.
Well, so I think the big thing for me, the big turning point in my life was I don't know if you've ever seen that album called Tom Scott and the LA Express,
Absolutely.
the blue jeans with the belt buckle
Yeah.
on it,
I've got it.
and Larry, right, isn't it a
Yeah.
great album? But
Oh,
Larry Carlton did it.
absolutely.
A friend of mine from Perth played me that album. I sat around and listened to it and went, oh my God, my worlds have collided. I don't know what's going on here. It's the pop world and the jazz world have
Yeah.
collided, And this
Yes.
guitar player just like blew me
Oh,
apart.
yes.
So I came over on the plane with Kerry Bedell, actually. And when we split at the airport, when I first came to Sydney, she said, look, we'll take you down to this club next week. So she took, cut a long story short, she took Michael Bartolome and I down to this club called French's in Oxford Street to hear a band called Crossfire.
Yeah. Mm.
Now, Jim Kelly, can
Jim
I say
Kelly.
no more?
Yeah.
And
Jim Kelly. Yeah.
wow, all I can say is wow. Like
Yeah.
I sat there looking and go, oh my God, this is just like Larry Carlton,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
with his own, his
Own
own,
way of doing it. Yeah. Crossfire.
yeah.
Oh,
And it
yeah.
was an amazing band. It just blew
Yeah.
us. Both of us went, wow, this is crazy. And that was sort of the introduction to fusion or jazz fusion or crossover, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I loved that. It was sort of the best of both worlds, having that Hank Marvin thing and the jazz thing in the background. It was like combining all that together and adding a bit of distortion and some rock sounds. And the
Yes.
whole thing sort of just, it worked, It worked
Well,
in
I
band.
think that's one of the real feathers in your cap is because a lot of people sort of try to be all things to all people, but you've got some real areas of music on the guitar that you have absolutely, in my opinion, mastered. And it's just wonderful playing. In fact, I want to take a little bit further forward now to another guest that I had on recently, Jamie Rigg. What a
Oh, yeah.
fantastic, what a nice guy, and what an
Yeah.
amazing musician.
Yeah,
Now,
it's great.
for a number of years, you were in the late night Oz TV band. Victor Rounds
Yeah.
on bass, Doug Gallagher,
Yep.
Jamie on keyboards, and you on guitar. Now,
Yeah.
I said it at the time in Jamie's thing. I think this is one of the best little TV bands I've ever heard. A four-piece band that had a massive sound. And you're there playing with all the big names of Australia and internationally. And again,
Yeah.
you've got to do different guitar styles. You can't be a one-trick
Exactly.
pony.
So right. I mean, so
Oh,
true. In Australia, we can't specialize. We
no,
really can't. You want to
no.
put three kids through college, pay off a
Yeah,
mortgage, you've
yeah.
got to diversify. Yeah.
And of course, taking nothing away from Larry Carlton, but in a country with 330 million people, Larry could specialise,
Oh, definitely.
in
Definitely.
that style that he was doing. I want
Oh,
to
for
play
sure.
I want to play a clip here, just a little bit of the time of my life, where two
Oh, yeah.
session singers in Sydney, great session singers, Chris Lloyds and Chrissy
Yeah.
Moy,
Yeah.
are out front of this four-piece band, and collectively you create, as a group, you create such a big sound. Like, this was from the Dirty Dancing soundtrack, and at the time
That's
you
right.
guys played this was a massive international hit. Everyone's hearing this on the radio. And
Yeah.
normally when you're confronted with, the typical four-piece RSL band going to have a crack at a song that everyone is hearing on the radio, it's one of those moments where you think, oh no. But you get to take with the tradition where the saxophone solo is, you take a wonderful guitar solo in that spot. So let's have
Right.
a look and a listen to The Time of My Life. Clive with the Jamie Rigg Late Night Oz Band playing some fantastic electric guitar.
on your mind when you say, stay with me tonight.
Remember, you're the one thing.
I can't get enough of.
Hey girl, I'll tell you something. This could be love
Because I've had
the time of my life.
and I never felt
This way before,
this, I swear,
it's the truth.
and I owe it all to you, 'cause I had
The time of my life.
and I searched through every open door I found.
It's so true.
And I owe it all to you.
Had the time of my life. I've never felt this way before.
Never felt this way.
It's so true. And I owe it all.
The time of my life. I never felt this way before. 'Cause I swear
It's the truth.
and I owe it all to you. 'Cause I had the time of my life. And I searched through every open door I found the truth. And I owe it all to you.
Clive, you mentioned a little bit earlier playing with Manhattan Transfer as being a career highlight. I first heard Manhattan Transfer, I got interested because the late, great Richie Cole, the great alto player, played a number of fantastic solos on those early records. And that's what dragged me into them. And of course, once the needle dropped on the old LP, you could tell that these were fabulous singers and everything was first class. The arrangements, the band, everything was first class. So how did little Clive from Australia get to sit in and be the guitar player in such, tell us that story. That must be amazing.
Well, I think it was mainly through a fabulous, incredible bass player by the name of Leon Gare.
Oh, yes.
He's been living here for years, 30 years or something now. But he came up from the States and he was a big session, number one player over there, playing with lots of, top line, Gino Vanelli, people like that, working with the best. And then he came out and we became friends. And I think it was through him and some other recommendations that their guitar player. So how it happened is they were coming out to Australia and New Zealand. That was it. We're doing, I think, 3 weeks or something in Australia and a week in New Zealand, something like that.
Yeah.
Their guitar player, whose name escapes me at the moment, but what happened is John Harrington, Steely Dan's MD, at the time was Bette Midler was doing, such a weird story, but Bette Midler was doing Vegas. John Harrington was working with her as guitar player MD. He got offered the job with Steely Dan. And of course, you don't say no to Steely Dan. No one does that.
No, that's right.
So he got offered the job as Steely Dan's MD. So John went from Bette Midler to Steely Dan, and the guitar player of Manhattan Transfer got offered. John said, "Do you want my job with Bette Midler?" So he obviously went, "Wow, this is great. I can work for a year in Vegas and not have to worry about commuting, put my, a great income and all that." So he sort of said, "Guys, I've got to leave you to do this because it's like regular work and all that." And basically, they were left without a guitar player. Now, they were going to get someone over there, of course, but they didn't have time. They said, "We may as well pick up someone in Australia." I think Leon recommended me, some other people recommended me, and I was asked to do it. So, I mean, of course, I went, "Oh my God, yeah, I would love to do it."
Here we go.
For sure.
Yeah.
Right. Ride the train. It was just crazy. So basically, they sent me some charts out. This is before we had iPads and things. So they sent me a whole bunch of charts and songs, and the book was like that thick. It's, many years and many albums worth of material there. So I woodshedded hard, like really I didn't want to screw this one up. So, I worked hard at it. And there was a mixture of the pop thing and the jazz thing, because remember, they did those albums with Jay Graydon from,
Yes.
you've heard of him.
Yes.
And they were very pop orientated. Boy
Yep.
from New York City,
Yep.
Twilight Zone, Twilight Tone, those songs were very pop. So there was a good mixture. I thought, well, this is good. This is sort of my bag, bit of jazz, bit of pop. This is really good. I'm feeling good about this.
Yes.
Until I looked at the solo for Twilight Zone, which is the Jay Graydon thing where he double tracks the whole thing.
Yes.
And it was like, oh my God, what am I going to do here? So I thought, okay, at that stage, I did have a multi-effects processor, but they weren't intelligent processors back then. You had to program the non-diatonic harmonies.
Yes.
So I had a whole bunch of patches set up. So as I would play through the solo, I would be switching the pedal board to change the harmony to fit with the chords I was playing.
Well, that we're gonna watch you play.
Oh, okay.
And one of the questions I was going to say is beautiful. I thought you've just stepped on a modern day harmonizer pedal.
No, not then. They weren't intelligent. No, they were not intelligent pitch shifters. They were dumb pitch shifters. So I managed to work it. And I remember doing the rehearsal. We went through, and I got to be honest, I was crapping myself.
Yeah, absolutely, as you would be.
Down in Melbourne, the first gig, and I was really freaking out. And these players were incredible. So we went to the rehearsal room, which was booked for 2 days. We played about 4 jazz tunes, and then we did that one. You called that one. Jeroen Drakowski, the musical director, who's an incredible piano player and a great friend.
Yes.
But at the time, I didn't know him that well at all.
No.
Called that one. I went, oh my God, here we go. So I put it on, and at the end of the song, Jeroen just said, okay, time's up, guys. We're going for pizza. And I thought, oh, it's just a break. But he actually, that was it.
That was it. He was happy. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the first gig was a baptism by fire, because I hadn't even played a lot of those songs. But it was great. He was happy there. He said, yeah, this guy can cut it. And so I did the tour, which lasted for a few weeks in New Zealand and Australia. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Said goodbye. Thought that's all I'd ever hear from them.
Yeah.
And a few weeks later, I got a call from their manager. And he said, would you be interested in coming over to Europe for a couple of months and doing all the jazz festivals? I went, well, I do have that gig at Greenacre Bowling Club, but you know what? I'll do it.
It's a New Year's Eve one. I always do it. Well, the clip we want to look at, and this one came from a promotional DVD for the Java Jazz Festival back in 2008. Now, I assume that's in the Philippines, is it? The Java Jazz?
No, it's in Indonesia.
In Indonesia.
Yeah.
Okay.
In Jakarta.
Jakarta. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's a fantastic. We're going to look at a little bit of the Twilight Zone, and we get to see. That's a wonderful backstory. We've got to hear now how the challenges you had to surmount to be able to take this. You're in the spotlight, nowhere to hide. There is no other guitar player.
That's right.
So if it goes wrong, it's going. You can't look at the piano player if it starts to go wrong. Let's have a look and a listen to the great Manhattan Transfer live at the Java Jazz Festival, and Clive taking a really exciting guitar solo.
When I hear this melody, the strange illusion takes over me. Through a tunnel of the mind, perhaps a present or future time. Whoa, whoa. Suddenly you hear the sound, this melody that keeps spinning round and round. Pyramid locomotion from this mystic unknown zone. Here in the twilight, here in the twilight dawn. Unpretentious government that saw the future through a third eye. People came with skepticism, thinking testing her precision. No. Suddenly she heard the sound, this melody that keeps spinning round and round. Signpost up ahead is calling from this mystic unknown zone. Here in the twilight, here in the twilight, here in the twilight, twilight dawn. Find the rhythm here in the twilight. Here in the twilight. Twilight zone. On a cold and rainy night when Mr. Miller had a rare fly. Clem was up there popping a rhythm, then the ancient stopped to listen with them play the beat. Oh, oh. Suddenly he heard the sound, this melody that keeps spinning round and round. Now he resides and plays trombone in the mystic unknown zone. Right here, right here, right here, right here. Here in the twilight. Here in the twilight. Here in the twilight. Here in the twilight, twilight, twilight. Here in the twilight, twilight, twilight. Here in the twilight, 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 twilight. Here in the twilight.
So, Clive, I notice on your website you list some of your qualifications, and you've got a master's degree in recording. So, first of all, you obviously have spent a lifetime being interested in recording. But tell us about, how did that come about? Because it's a very different twist from studying the guitar to studying
totally.
recording. Tell us about that.
Well, I've sort of had a parallel life with both of those, my favorite two things, playing guitar and recording and mixing engineering.
Yes.
So back in the days before home studios, I actually had a home studio, you know,
Yeah.
before they even thought of, you know, like when
Yes.
I had a little 4-track and a mixer and all that. I used to love dabbling in that. So that just kept growing and growing. 4 tracks, 8 tracks, 16, 24,
Absolutely.
etc. And
Yep.
then digital came out. So I've always been very involved in that side of it. But probably, 10 years ago or something like, maybe more, 12 years ago, whatever it was, I was thinking, well, in case the work falls off, which it hasn't done, but if it had done, I
Yeah.
thought I should really have something else up my sleeve. And a lot of people were moving, a lot of musicians were moving correctly, in a way, diversifying their careers and getting into teaching as well.
Yes.
And I think that's a really good thing. I often tell my students now, it's really important to diversify. Australia's too small to specialize, as you mentioned earlier with Larry Carlton.
Absolutely.
You can do that in America, but not here.
No. No.
So you and especially with the music scene the way it is these days, you need to diversify. So I thought, someone suggested, Craig Herbert, a good friend of mine, said, you should do the master's degree. And I said, oh, really? I said, I know a bit about it, but I've never really studied it in that depth. He says, man, you know plenty about it. You should do it. So I did it at Macquarie Uni, and that was the story there. I basically did the master's in recording arts, and it was great. That was a ticket into AIM at the time, the Australian Institute of Music, to
Yes.
teach audio there. And later on down the track into where I am now, which is JMC Academy in Sydney.
Yes.
Fantastic place to teach, and really quite enjoy it. Like it's a different part of your brain. It's a different discipline.
I
And,
think it's great. I think
well, you do a lot of teaching, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And oddly enough, I did a master's degree in recording
Oh,
way
great.
back. I don't know when it was, probably 15 years ago.
Oh, wow,
Mainly
yeah.
for me, I was looking to get back into some study, and I just wanted to study something I was interested in. And
Yeah,
like you,
yeah.
it's funny, you talked about the home studio. I can remember all of those things, the 4-track, and then
Yep.
the 8-track Fostex on quarter-inch tape,
Yes.
and then the 16-track Fostex,
Yeah.
and thank God digital come along, because there was no way I was going to be able to afford a 24-track, and I'm just sort of thinking I've got myself in a corner now.
So it
But,
came across just at the right time for you.
Yeah, it came across at the right time, and we all nowadays have home studios that if you got to pinch yourself what we can do in our own homes. The quality of the recording is just
Amazing.
through the roof, isn't it? For anyone who's
Totally.
creative,
Oh my God, yeah.
Now, you're such a wonderful guitar player. Did you do any formal qualifications in guitar, or largely just the private lessons and self-taught?
Yeah, I haven't really, like, after I left Perth, I don't think I've never had another lesson. There was a little while, I went for one lesson in LA when I was over there.
Yeah.
I took one lesson there with a really good guitar player there, and that was about, but I've never really got into that much. I did study, I went to the con here, but that
Yes.
was more to do with arranging, studying arranging.
Okay.
and improvisation with Roger Frampton, arranging with George Brombeck, and did that.
Two
But
two
lots of guitar.
wonderful teachers there.
Oh God, yeah,
Wonderful
yeah,
teachers,
yeah.
Do you do any private guitar teaching, or is it just something you separate performing and recording and not so much
Yes,
teaching?
exactly. I've
Yeah.
never really taught guitar. There was a couple of times where I dabbled for a couple of weeks. Went, I can't do this. I'm just not a good guitar teacher. Like
Yeah.
I don't know. I've been playing since I was about 7 or 8 or something like that. It's just like breathing. Like
Yes.
how do you
Yeah.
teach someone to breathe? Well, you breathe in and
Yeah.
you breathe out. That's it.
Well, I think that's a wonderful, honest assessment, because the world's full of a lot of people who are great players but terrible teachers. So with your teaching, you're probably doing what, a couple of days a week teaching and a couple of days performing. How's your life balancing at the moment?
Well, not well.
Not well, no.
Too much. So basically what's happened is, like, at the moment I'm doing like 4 days in at JMC, but not full days, 3 full days and 1 partial day.
Okay.
But at the moment, like, I've been doing a lot of touring this year, and every weekend now, from about 3 or 4 weekends, four weekends ago, we started touring, and we don't finish till just before Christmas. And that's every weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So
Wow.
it's 7 days a week at the moment, right
Yeah.
through until Christmas. And that happened also during, when was it? February, March, April, all that time as well. I get these crazy times where I just don't have a day off for months on end. But
Yeah.
I'm gonna next year, I've made a solid resolution. I'm gonna cut that back a little
Cut
bit.
that
You've
back
got
a
to have
bit.
a day off or 2 days
Oh,
off.
absolutely. But I
Yeah.
think this is wonderful because, particularly in Australia, I mean, we're roughly the same sort of age group, but I remember growing up as a kid, every pub, no matter what town you're in, would have a band on a Friday or Saturday night, not a duo.
Yes.
They'd have
No, a band.
a band. And you
Yes.
could just go from one pub to the next and hear all these different bands. But it's just the days of that live entertainment, which was a massive part for a
Yeah.
working musician,
Yeah.
seems to seems to have
It's
disappeared.
gone. I know, and it's such an
Yeah,
important, as you say, it's such an
yeah.
important part of just life. Music's life, and if that's not happening, it's not good. It's not a good
It's
reflection on
also
society.
it's also the training ground to learn your stuff, isn't it? That
Yes,
type
who
of
do you go
stuff.
and see? That's
Yeah,
right. I used to go and see people, like, and go, oh wow, I want to be like him. I want to
yeah,
be like, he plays great. You
yeah.
can't do that as much anymore. It's
Well, let's have a look. A band that you have played with recently is Jeff Duff's Spinning Wheel
oh
Band.
yeah,
And we've got a little bit of a clip here from, I think it was at Bird's Basement in Melbourne,
yes,
not that
yeah,
long ago. And again, for fans of the podcast, people will recognise Ralph Pyle here on trumpet. Wonderful, wonderful guy and a wonderful trumpet player. And I think
yeah,
Graham Jesse's on tenor sax. There's
yes.
some
Graham's there.
familiar
Yeah,
faces in this band, but the camera zeroes in on your guitar. I think you're playing one of your Anderson guitars. I don't know, one of the Strat type guitars. And you take a great solo here. Let's have a bit of a look. You playing live in Melbourne pretty recently with the
sure.
Spinning Wheel Band. So, Clive, on your website, you give equal billing to your role as a producer. You really set yourself up as you're a guitarist and a producer. What is the role of a producer? For the people who might not know, it's a word that's tossed around. What exactly does a producer do?
Yeah, okay, that's a really good question. But the thing I must start off by saying is that the role of producer has changed dramatically over the last 20, 25 years. With the whole technological revolution, it's very, very different now. But originally, the producer was like hired by the record company to produce an artist, like Quincy Jones, produce some artist, and he'll pull in all the musicians. He'll get the arrangements organized, either do them himself or get someone else to do them. He's the middleman who coordinates the whole recording project. That's how it was and always was that way. And you would have a separate engineer, and you would have a separate musical director, all different roles, and it worked beautifully for, forever.
Yeah.
But then things started changing with digital, and people thought, oh, I can do all this myself, like I can use virtual instruments and software to create tracks. I can also write the tracks. So the roles became very blurred. So, and even the role of the engineer has sort of been absorbed by the producer a lot of times. A lot of people now are producer/engineers.
Yes.
Some are producer/engineers/composers, and performers. So everything's changed. So it's a little hard to define, but still, I think the producer's role is his job to pull the thing together, to pull the recording together and make sure that it's done well. And what goes out to the world is a polished, great performance and the best that he can do to realize the artist's vision. So an artist comes to you, it's not about you, it's about them. You've got to make their vision come to fruition.
Fantastic. That's a really good analysis, I think. I had the honor of doing a podcast with Pamela Williams, a fantastic saxophonist from Los Angeles. And Pamela's, one of her quiet little things she puts on her website is she's had a #1 Billboard hit playing saxophone. And when I got to, it's a beautiful, I forget the track, but it's fantastic. And the sound is just amazing. I said, where did you record that? And she said, oh, here in my home studio. Who produced it? Me.
Yeah.
And this is a #1 jazz Billboard chart. If you hear it, you just think, oh, it's Quincy, the late, great Quincy Jones. Did Quincy just do this on the side for
Yeah.
And I think that really brought it home to me as if, wow, it's changed. The world has changed.
It's amazing how different it is. Yeah.
Just,
And even those roles, like traditional roles, they're all just blurred and molded into one now. People do it all, just do everything themselves.
Yes.
So, to answer that question, then it is hard. But I think that what I said, bringing that artist vision to fruition is what it's all about, really.
And of course, there's a lot of people, I'm sure, where you live, there are a lot of people who have a dream. They might be a singer-songwriter, but they don't have those skills. They don't possess those skills. And I guess that's where you can really help bring that dream to life.
Yes, that's exactly right. Like a lot of people, good songwriters often don't get involved with the engineering. They don't get involved with the production so much. And that's where they need a good producer to bring all that together,
Yeah. Now, I just want to take a little bit of a tangent here. A part of your life, which I don't believe is a current thing you do, but you did create some success as creating production music, library music, soundtrack music.
Oh, yes.
And this was a little part of your career. For some people, and some of the great artists I've interviewed, even from Sydney, Peter Northcote and Michael Fix, for them it still is a part of their life. But can you just talk a little bit about your involvement in production music and
the ambient years.
The ambient years.
Yeah, I was approached by a video recording company to do some ambient recordings. They wanted 10 albums.
Yes.
They would provide the soundtracks which they recorded. They actually recorded dolphins and all sorts of things.
Yes.
And they said, can you do the music to it? And I went, yeah, I can fit that in. You never say no. You never say no in this business. You always say yes.
No, that's right.
My wife Anita says the funniest thing though. She's like, yeah, you made 10 ambient albums produced by the most stressed out musician in Sydney. I should have listened to my own stuff. But anyhow, so they said, can you do it? And I did, okay, well, let's do it. And I had a big studio at the time over in Pymble.
Okay.
With a couple of rooms, and all that. So it was plenty of room. It was a good place to record.
Yes.
And basically put those down. But just as a little aside, it's quite interesting. If you go on any like Spotify or YouTube, you'll see, if you put my name in this, hundreds of these have been illegally copied.
Yeah. Yeah.
They put my name down as the composer, but
Yeah.
they've been illegally copied. It's amazing.
Oh.
And anyhow, but look, when I first did it, it was terrific because it was before a lot of that illegal stuff was happening.
Yes.
And we released it. I think there was 250,000 copies in the first few months done in Europe. So it was nice. It paid for our swimming pool and all that back in the day. So terrific.
It's
you can make some
interesting.
good money.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's interesting. I can't think of the guy's name, but up here in southeast Queensland, back at the start when the EWIs first happened.
Yeah.
And he used to originally sell CDs back when CDs were a thing at the local markets. But this guy became a millionaire. He was in the right place at the right time, just when the relaxation music thing became big.
Oh, yeah.
And he was creating these albums and just selling squillions of them around the world. And he lived in a beautiful place up in the hinterlands of the Sunshine Coast. And I don't know whatever happened to him, but I always thought, I shook my head thinking, this guy's playing, songs that might have two chords in them, C to D minor, playing for 6 minutes and just playing something with a pan flute sound on the EWI. And
with a big pad behind it.
Exactly right. And in essence, driving around with a Rolls Royce and not too sure what to do. So I think that bird's flown the coop. But it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting to talk about it.
But it is because it's all about timing, isn't it?
Timing.
Like he obviously jumped in when the ambient thing was taken off and made a fortune out of it.
Yeah,
and I did pretty good out of it, So like I was pretty happy with it. But it was all about time. If you did that now, you wouldn't sell a copy.
Not at all. And like you say, everything's free now. One of the remaining ways to make an income as a musician is live performance, because you can't at this stage, and who knows where artificial intelligence is going to go, but at this stage, if you want to experience that vibe of live musicians, we'll go to a concert. And you're proof that there's still work out there. If you're a great musician, there's work out there as a performing artist.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Now, I want to take you back to that fantastic late night Oz band. And this time, backing at the time one of the major international acts, Bryan Ferry.
Oh, yeah, Bryan was great.
We're going to look at Kiss and Tell, which was a big hit for Bryan. A lot of people would probably think Let's Stick Together is probably the song they think of Bryan, but Kiss and Tell was a big hit for him.
Yeah.
And you take a really good solo here, really good. I think it's on your Stratocaster. Your Schecter, I think. I don't know. I think it's
one of those.
And this time there is three backing singers, one of which is Wendy Matthews, who in Australia a lot of people will recognise Wendy. She's in the middle of the three girls doing the backup singing. And Bryan actually turns around and looks at you when you're doing your solo. He actually really enjoys it.
Yeah, he was cool. He was lovely to work with. Another thing too is that on this particular day, Doug couldn't make it, so it's Greg Henson on drums. Greg filled in for Doug
on this particular
Doug had to do a tour or something for about a week or something, so Greg filled in. The rest of the band's the same, but Greg on drums, and he does a great job.
The band just does a great job. Did you have a chance to have a rehearsal with Bryan?
We used to do a rehearsal in the afternoon before it would go live. That was a live show too. There was no pre-recorded. We did that live, but we'd have a rehearsal in the afternoon. So we ran it then, and just felt it out and sort of played with the arrangement a bit. Everyone was happy and blocked it in, and then played it live on the night.
Well, let's have a look. Bryan Ferry live on TV, Kiss and Tell, and Clive in the guitar role. Nowhere to Hide. A really good song. Let's have a look.
Flash photograph, it's the only light you see. No secret life, there's no secret you can't steal. Your lips are moving, but I will never know what they mean. Kiss and tell, funny talk, and love that burns.
So, Clive, you've done so many high pressure jobs, or what appear to be high pressure jobs. You're on national TV, and you said you did get a chance to have a bit of a rehearsal, but a rehearsal's never the same as the real thing.
No.
When she's on, you've only got one take. And,
Yep.
and in the studio, as you know, well, you can have 20 takes if you need to. You might
Exactly. That's so true.
make a few people angry, but
Yeah.
but no one's going to die if you
Yeah.
completely mess up your part in a recording
Yeah.
studio. You can always live another day, but when the camera's zooming in on the guitar solo, you're there for better or worse. How have you dealt over the years with that? I guess I don't know what the best word is, whether it's performance anxiety, stage fright. Has it been an issue for you, or have you been one of the lucky ones?
Oh, that's a really good question, Brian. And I'm still asking myself these days, how do you cope with it? It's like I don't have a particular, like some people have certain coping skills that they use to mentally calm them down or whatever.
Yes.
I get nervous like crazy. I mean, I guess a lot of it depends on the actual performance, on the gig.
Yeah.
So, like on some of the real big ones, like I mean, I've blown it a couple of times. I saw a clip the other day of John Mayer doing this huge concert, and John Mayer's doing this blues side, and he hits a real bad note, and he goes "whoa" and laughs at it, and turns around to the band, and then he bends the bad note to make it a blues note.
Yes.
Beautiful recovery,
Yeah.
But everyone does it, and everyone handles it different ways. I don't think I've ever really had a great way of coping. I do get nervous if it's a really big show. And more to the point, what you said before, which is so true. If you're in a studio, I never really get nervous in the studio because, as you say, you can do it again. The great
Yeah.
drop in, you can drop in, do it again.
Yeah.
It's not a major problem, and
No.
it's an easier environment. When you're in front of a big crowd and you've got that big one to play, the big note to,
Mm.
or the big solo to do, or a written thing, whatever it is, and you have to cut it.
Yeah.
The nerves can get to you, like you can feel it. I mean, definitely. I do a lot of work with the SSO, the Sydney
Yes.
Symphony Orchestra, especially when we're doing these music to films. Like we did the last year, we did the music of Hans Zimmer,
Yes.
and we've done the Pixar in concert that Gordo was on. Gordon
Yes. Yes.
Rittmeister was on with me.
Yes.
Pixar in concert, and I've done a whole stack of those, and they're nerve wracking because often you'll have like the big guitar solo, or the James Bond one,
No.
when we did Skyfall, you got this 100-piece orchestra going ba-da-bum, ba-da-bum, and you've got to come in with and you don't want to blow it, and it's nerve wracking. I mean,
Yeah.
literally, I can feel myself almost shaking. A 100-piece band goes bop, and you've got to go. It's scary, and I don't
Absolutely.
really have any answers or any solutions. I mean, I just crap myself and go for it.
Well, look, it's everyone has a different take. I just want to share two little moments. I
Please.
heard a great podcast on with Chris Bodie, the wonderful
Oh,
trumpet
yeah,
player.
yeah,
Plays with
beautiful player.
Sting and all that.
Yes,
But he
yes.
tells us stories. The person asked him a bit, look, have you had any moments live with Sting that didn't quite go to plan? And he almost couldn't tell the story for laugh. And he said, yes. He said, I remember one day, he said, I'm traveling the world, and being a trumpet player, I practice every day. And one day he said, look, no, stuff it. I'm going to take a day off. I'm going to explore this beautiful city that I'm in. I'm not going to practice today. We're playing the same stuff. It'll be right. So he took one day off, and he said, like the following day in a big sort of stadium, and they're playing one of Sting's songs that has this sort of obligato moment on the trumpet where the spotlight's on Chris.
Oh, no.
Sting plays a suspended fourth chord, and the thing goes, and he said he went to do his first note, and he said it just come out like a duck being strangled, and apparently Sting just collapsed in laughter. Just look, so there's no hide, and Sting just looked around, and the whole band, and he said, do you reckon I've taken a day off since? He said, like, he just learned his lesson that on that instrument,
wow.
it's
Wow.
so,
Yes.
but he just
It's
thought,
intense.
he's a professional player. He thought, I'm going to take a day off. And that's a wonderful story. The other one I want to share
I
with
love
you,
it.
but the opposite story come from a podcast I heard with someone interviewing the great James Morrison, the wonderful Australian multi-instrumentalist. They asked him a wonderful question about how did COVID affect him, and he said, well, for the first time in his life, he didn't play the trumpet for 3 months, just didn't touch it.
Oh, wow.
No,
Wow.
for the first time.
Yeah.
And then when it looked like, hello, we're going to be able to play again, he thought, I'll get the trumpet out. He said, I could do everything on the trumpet that I could ever do for 10 minutes. And after that, it just completely collapsed. And he said, I had the range, I had the speed, I had the power. He thought, hello, how good's this? I've taken a free month. So he said he spent the next few months just gradually, okay, I can do it for 15 minutes.
The chops back
get the
together.
chops back.
Yeah,
But the thing I really wanted to share with you, that same person said, James, how do you deal with stage fright? And I can always remember James. He said, I'm not the best person to ask that question. He said, and the guy said, well, why is that? And he said, well, I've never experienced it. And there's this silence. And he said, what do you mean? He said, well, it's just something I've never experienced. He said, why would I be anything but excited out of my skin to stand there and share what I love doing with my audience?
Yeah.
And I just took away, that was a coffee moment for me. Now, that's everyone's different. But his entire mentality is just, I tipped it on its head.
Yeah, wow.
Isn't that amazing? And
it is. That's an incredible story, yeah. I never heard that one, yeah.
Because I think what it made me realise is he's a jazz musician. He only has to play the notes he wants to play.
Sure.
If he's not feeling that good, I'm not going to play G above high C tonight.
Yes.
I'm happy with high C. Whereas, in some of those things where you're saying, in the James Bond, you're in the moment and you've got a job to play. And you just imagine the conductor looking over at you if you're stammering through,
Oh,
So,
my God, it happens. I mean, I've done it. I've blown it a few times. I was going to say about this business about pressure is that sometimes, I remember we were doing the opening of Sanctuary Cove.
Yes.
And that was one Whitney Houston, Sinatra. Sinatra, all those people.
Yeah.
And I remember we had this huge, big piece to start the thing of fireworks and all that. And I had a big guitar solo on it. And at the rehearsal, which we had many rehearsals.
Yes.
And it was difficult to play. It was extremely high and bendy and in the wrong key. It wasn't like the original one.
No.
So it was really hard. And I remember every rehearsal we did, I played it perfectly. When we actually went to air on the night, I blew one of the notes. So like I bet it and I missed it, So it happened, you really come down on yourself. You just feel terrible because you've played it perfect every other time.
Yeah.
Why did you blow it when the red light was on? Yeah.
Probably my favourite Gershwin song. You and Steve Davis again, just the two, but with Coco the Wonder Dog in this clip.
Oh, yes.
The Wonder Dog has joined you. And I think this is my favourite Gershwin song. They can't take that away from me. Wow.
Great tune.
I love
it too. Yeah.
And tell us,
did a great version of this
too.
too.
There's so many great versions.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about what's your memory of this tune, you and Steve doing it? Do you have any memories of this?
No, we just still wanted to do a couple of impromptu things. Believe it or not, we have a bit of a following in South America. Work that out. I don't know how that happened. Okay. So that's why we do a few bosses here and there. But Steve's a good networker. He's got a huge following over there. And so we wanted to put a few pretty well raw, just presented raw with a microphone and play it live and then just overdub or use the looper for the solo. And so we just said, let's do that. And I'll sort of sketch out a chart and we do it.
Let's have a look and a listen to Steve and Clive. They can't take that away from me.
The way you hold your knife, the way you sip your tea, the memory of all that. Oh no, they can't take that away from me. The way you smile just beams, the way you sing off key, the way you haunt my dreams. Oh no, they can't take that away from me. We may never, never, never meet again on this bumpy road to love. Still I'll always, always keep the memory of the way you hold your knife, the way you sip your tea, the way you changed my life. Oh no, they can't take take that away from me. No, they can't take that away from me. We may never meet again on this bumpy road to love. Still I'll always keep the memory of the way you hold your knife, the way you sip your tea, the way you changed my life. Oh no, they can't take that away from me. No, they can't take that away. No matter what they say, no, they can't take that away from me.
Okay, Clive, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you? If they just want to reach out for whatever reason, what's your preferred way for people to connect with you?
Yeah, I've got a contact page on the website, so that's usually the best way. It's got a number of ways on there. I think it's in the last page. It's got contact, and they can
Okay,
get
and
me
that's just your name, clivelendich.com. Is that
there. Yeah,
correct?
that's so. Yeah, the website. Yeah, cliveimage.com. Yeah,
And we'll put that on the screen, and it'll be there so people, if they can't work out how to spell your name, they can check. They can,
Don't
they
worry,
can
I've had a
check.
few different spellings on that one.
That's right. When you look back, how long have you been a professional musician?
You know, when I was doing like a lot of gigs before I could drive. You know, I remember Mum used to drive me every weekend, Fridays and Saturdays, out to a place
Yeah.
out from Perth, and I was doing a reception centre, playing with a band, learning the ropes and all that. You know,
Yes.
so I was doing a lot of pro gigs, professional sort of like money
Yeah,
gigs,
yeah,
well
making
before I could
money
even
from it.
drive. Yeah,
That's fine.
but when I came over here probably from when I got here when I was 20, and then I remember Johnny O'Keefe flew me over, actually. I mean, it was done.
Okay.
He was working for Johnny O'Keefe,
Okay. Yeah.
and hence the connection there.
Yeah.
So we went straight to work as soon as basically when I got here, and toured with his show and started doing a lot of work from there on. So probably from about 20, I would say.
So So without giving the ghost away, what's that? 40 years or
Yeah, more, 46
more
or
than that?
something years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a long time to be in an industry can be really brutal. You know, so many
Yeah.
people come and go. What do you think when you look back over that more than 4 decades, you've been able to support a family and make a decent living? Is there some secret to your success if you
I
look back?
think, yeah, I honestly think, and I think even Rex might have mentioned it on his one about diversifying. I think he's
Yes.
the same, but he doesn't play a lot of different things really well. Like he doesn't put his eggs in one basket. And I'm the
Yes.
same. I've always done the same. Like I've always tried to play as many different styles as possible.
Yes.
Try to cover it, like, you know, do a country gig, do some lap steel sounds and all that. Not the real
Yes.
one, I mean,
No, no,
and
no.
do all
Yeah.
that sort of thing. You know, acoustic, bit of nylon, bossa, you know, rock. I just did in May, we did a big tour with American guy or American groups who came out. We did Led Zeppelin, and I'd never played Zeppelin, you know, I'd
Wow.
never really done that. So I
Yeah.
had to do some really hard woodshedding on that to do all the Jimmy Page stuff, you know.
Yeah.
So, and I thought, well, I can either say no or I can do it and put another string to the bow, you know what I mean? So, yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's good to diversify. It keeps you busy, keeps you active. And I think that's what it's all about. And I think that's why I've survived for a long time. The other thing, too, is I remember uh, asking myself that sort of question back in the day. We'd do a lot of those Hilton circuits. And that's where I
Yes.
first met Sedaka. And I'd done the tour of Sedaka around the Hilton circuits. And at the end, they offered me the job full time in LA, offered to fly me over, and my wife, you know, Anita,
Yes.
and my baby who was just been born over.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, why are they doing this? And years later, I talked to him about it, and he said, because you played to make me look good. And I
Wow.
think that was really important. He said, you didn't care about how you look. It wasn't all about Mr. Guitar Player, the fanboy and the hair.
Yeah.
It wasn't about all that. He said,
Yeah.
you made me look good. You supported my voice. You kept out of the way in the right spots. And I learned a lot from him saying that to me. Unconsciously, I was doing that. And I've always realized my role as a guitar player is to make the artist look good. And I think that's happened every time I've got a big gig like Transfer or Sedaka or whoever, with any of the big touring things and that. I think it's because I've put myself in the back and supported them, made them look good.
I think that, I mean, I always ask my guests, for the best piece of advice, but I think you've just given it. I think that's wonderful advice to know what your role is in the game
Yes, yes.
and play that role,
I see it so wrong so many times,
Oh,
like I'll see bands and the singer's singing a vitally important part of the song and the guitar
yeah,
player sitting there soloing over the top of them. Like,
that's,
can't you hear what's going on? I think, like not only are you there to support the act or the
yes.
person out the front as best you can, but the other thing is, and this is sort of obvious to most of us, but some of you
Mm,
don't do it, and that is to listen to other people on the stage,
yeah,
to listen to
absolutely.
what everyone else is doing and fit in. I remember Jay Stewart, who's a great keyboard player and a good friend of mine, and we were doing a gig with he and his wife Kim Hart, and he said, "Yeah, I love this band because we all play like producers."
Well, that's a good way of putting it too.
That was a really good thing what he said. I thought that's really cool. In other words, we're listening to our role in the overall scheme of things. What's our role here? Do we
Yeah.
stand out here or do we pull back here? Do we play chords here? I mean, the guitar players are the worst. I mean, it's all
Oh,
about the solo and all about
yeah,
being out front.
yeah,
As Stephen Lukather has said in his book, The Gospel According to Luke,
yeah.
Stephen Lukather from Toto,
Yes,
he says
yes,
you're going to be playing rhythm guitar in your life 98% of the time, or whatever it was.
correct,
He said,
correct.
you're going to be playing rhythm most of the time, and yet
Yes.
so many guitar players. I see them on YouTube all the time, and no one
Oh,
plays normal. They're all doing
yeah,
this.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, I mean, it's all over the place, and there's a million
Yeah,
notes.
yeah,
But can you put them in a
yeah.
situation where they've got to support an act, and they
Well,
wouldn't know what to do?
in Jamie Riggs' episode, I played that wonderful version you did backing the late Glenn Fry,
Oh, Desperado, was it? Yeah,
Desperado, and
yeah,
you
that's
you were the
beautiful.
guitar player, and at the end, Glenn looks over to the band and says, "Thanks, nice job, fellas." And
Yeah,
you guys should take so much. Like, there's a guy who spent his life talking about playing with some good players,
yeah,
in
yeah,
the
yeah.
Eagles and what
Oh
have you.
my God, yeah.
Oh my God. But it was a moment when, again, what could have been a real disaster, the local four-piece band are going to back
Yeah,
Glenn Fry on his most famous song. And yet,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know what I mean? It could have been just an Aussie disaster, but
Yeah.
it was wonderful.
And it was such an honor to do those gigs, like
Oh,
we had to pinch ourselves, and go, oh, we're playing it Desperado with Glenn Fry,
I
like it doesn't get much
know.
better than that.
No. Is there anything you want to share with the audience that you've got coming up? I mean, we're recording this in late 2024, but is there anything you might just want to share with the audience to keep an eye out for that you're
No,
involved in?
nothing particularly huge. We're doing some more recording with Steve Davis. We're going to do some more recording with him. I want to
Yes,
get back to a more rootsy type thing with him.
yes,
Maybe some real strings and all that. So I might get back into some orchestrating for that. So that's on the immediate horizon.
yes,
Uh, as far as the touring goes, at the moment we're doing a Blues Brothers tour that Dale Jenner, a friend of mine, put together, and these
yes.
are the guys who are from that Dan Aykroyd put together from the States.
Wow.
So it's
Yeah,
they really nail it.
yeah,
Kieran's
yeah,
an
yeah,
incredible harp player, and Wayne's a
yeah,
great singer, and
yeah,
and some good players in the band. Like we've
yes,
got Dale and Mitch Farmer and
yeah,
Queenslander,
yes.
yeah, it's just really a lot of fun.
A lot of
So
fun.
Jeff Camilleri on bass, and so
Yeah,
it's a good band, and so we're doing that at the moment. That finishes in December, and then we've got a fair bit of work coming up in the new year. We're touring again, doing some different shows. I'm doing a Bacharach concert with the Sydney Symphony Orchestra in December not at the Opera House for a change. We're doing it at the Sydney Coliseum. which is, I
Okay.
think, out in Rudy Hill or somewhere, into that new big venue they
Yeah,
built
I've
out.
heard about it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
supposed to be fantastic. So we're
Okay.
doing the music of Burt Bacharach, and that's got Emma Pask and
Oh,
a
great.
whole bunch of people doing it. So
Yes.
that's going to be a lot of fun. So a couple more gigs with the SSO coming up, and that's one of them. And so just a few little bits and pieces of everything, really, you know. And,
When we look back at our conversation, your
mm,
success is your ability. I'm going to go and play a Blues Brothers, review. How
yeah,
different is that from playing They Can't Take That Away From Me? It's
exactly,
just, it is
exactly.
poles apart. And
Yeah, it totally is.
there's not too many people who can do it. You should be really proud of what you've done. Any thoughts of hanging up the plectrum and retiring
Oh,
eh? No, just
never. My
not
wife said,
never.
you're not gonna, my wife said, you're gonna give up teaching, right? But
Okay.
you can keep doing your gigs. I'll let you do
Oh,
those.
well,
So
well,
I've got the go ahead.
well,
So I
how,
could be like 80 on stage, 85 on stage
well,
playing.
well, think of Les
Yeah,
Paul. Les
yeah,
Paul played
sure.
right to the end. Now, just to finish on, we always end on a collaboration. We had a lot of fun putting together the Shaker song, a song that was written by Jay Beckenstein, who anyone who
Foxfire
was
Jara.
oh,
Yeah.
who anyone who was around in the 80s, they were, I guess, one of the forerunners of the jazz fusion or
Yes.
the
Yeah.
smooth jazz, whatever it became.
Yeah.
Wonderful band. And of course, Manhattan Transfer also did a famous version of the Shaker song. But you and me
Yes.
do it as you play three different guitars here, and you play one of my favourite guitars. I've got my first professional instrument I ever bought back there, a Gibson
Oh,
ES345.
oh, look at that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Now that's a
Beautiful.
1969, made in 69. I got it in about 72. My dad went guarantor on a loan for me, and that cost a
Fantastic.
fortune back then. And I learned so much because he actually wanted me to pay the loan back. I thought at the time, how good's this? How good's this? But every month there'd be the knock on the door looking for the thing. And and for me, it was a thing of, okay, I'm going to have to I'm going to have to actually get good at this thing called music so I can get some
So I
money
can get
to
money to
pay
pay
him
it back.
back. But I've still got that instrument, and it's the first
Oh, that's
decent instrument I
fantastic.
ever had. In this
They're a
clip,
great guitar.
well, you play a beautiful 335 in
335,
this.
it's a Dotnik 58. Yeah.
Wow. Clive, thanks so much for being part of the series. It's been fantastic just revisiting all of those amazing musical moments.
It's been amazing doing it. I really enjoyed it. And you asked the best questions. You really do. Fantastic.
Thanks, Clive. We'll go out with the Shaker song. You're on nylon string. You're on your beautiful Yamaha jazz guitar and that 335, and I'm playing a little bit of alto sax.
Beautiful.
Bye for now, mate.
Thanks a lot. Great, Brian.